Australia, the sixth largest country on Earth. An ancient, rugged, and unforgiving land with abundant animal life, both beautiful and deadly. Found within its awe-inspiring landscapes and natural beauty exists a deep history of unexplained mysteries for anyone with the courage to investigate them. Tonight, we join Ben on a journey across this vast island continent in search of answers to events that have reshaped the lives of so many that have been exposed to Unexplained Phenomena Australia. With your host, Ben Hurle.
G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unexplained Phenomena Australia. Today we're going to have a look at a really interesting UFO flap. Yes, that's right, a UFO flap. And what is a flap? That's when UFOs appear in one location over an extended period of time, or in an area. And that definitely happened in this location, which is Kempsey in New South Wales in 1971 and 1972. And how I came across this interesting series of events was I've got a whole vast collection of old newspaper articles. And I was going through them and I found this big bunch that had been put together, and it outlined some really interesting and somewhat crazy events that occurred in Kempsey in 1971. And I thought, wow, this is just perfect for this show. So I got it all out and I just started reading through it and going through it, and all the information's on yellow old paper. So 1971. And I thought this is a really great example of a flap, because there are many people who reported it. And it was actually captured by the local newspaper, the Argus. So the newspapers are the history. They capture everything that happens in the local community. And I'm not sure whether the event is remembered up there now or not. A lot of the people might have died by now who had those experiences. And if I ever get the chance to go up that way, I would certainly ask some questions. But it's a long way from where I am, and not an easy task. So the Argus newspaper really got involved with it. And why wouldn't they? I mean, you know, newspapers love stories that sell newspapers, and they don't really go through it in an overly sensational way, which I like as well. So it's not, you know, alien, crazy alien stuff on the lawn or anything like that at all. But they report what the witnesses say, and they report it in a pretty straightforward manner. And the local community just embraced it. And it's like anything else. Once one mushroom pops up, the others start to appear as well. So I thought the best way to tackle this is to look at the newspaper articles and to look at them in the order in which they occurred. And the whole story starts to reveal itself. And people are seeing that other people have seen something, and over here and over there. And Kempsey is surrounded by a lot of really small places that are barely dots on a map. They really are. And I'd never heard of these locations, and some of the names are a little bit strange. But it's great, it really is. And you can see that entire region in 1971 was the focus of UFO activity. Why? Who knows? You just can't tell why. But the first event was really an incredible event. It was just sensational. And when I read about it, I thought, wow, this is just something that is incredible. And so the Argus, which is the local newspaper, So, but before I start, I should just give you a little bit of a grounding on where Kempsey actually is. So just bear with me one tick. I'll just bring that up for you. So this is Kempsey, just to give you a geographical location. So there we go. There is Victoria in the bottom of the picture, Melbourne, Tasmania below that. And then you've got Sydney in New South Wales, which most people would be familiar with. And then to the north of Sydney, up on the north coast, or just off the north coast, Kempsey's close to the coastline, where that red dropper is, and it's below the Gold Coast and below Brisbane. So that's the area of Australia that we're focusing on today. So you've got a bit of an idea geographically where that is. Now, in the Argus on Thursday, April the 8th, 1971. Now, April is an important month when it comes to UFOs, because that was the month that the Westall 66 schoolyard encounter occurred, and the Burke's Flat bending headlights encounter, which I've spoken about on this show before. They are not in the same year, but in the same month, April. So April pops up quite often, as does October as well. You know, they can appear at any time, but they're months in Australia where there's been a lot of reported UFO activity. So on Thursday, April 8th, 1971, in the Argus newspaper, they reported that a man at Greenhill, which is a little area just out of Kempsey to the west, a man at Greenhill claimed on Friday night that he'd been sucked or drawn through a window pane in the kitchen of his home. That's right, sucked or drawn through a window pane. And that got my attention straight away. That was the first thing I read when I looked at this article, and I thought, wow, that's an incredible story. The man was aged 34, and he fell 7 feet to the ground outside his home, but was unhurt except for minor cuts on one hand and arm. The terrified man had told his wife that he'd saw a strange, small, saucer-shaped face at the window, and that he was drawn out through the glass by some unknown force. And his wife, who was aged 26, said that she heard breaking glass in the kitchen sometime after 10 p.m. And she just thought that her husband had broken crockery and glass and was drying it, and was drying on the sink. So she ran outside, and she saw that his legs and his hips were disappearing horizontally through the top half of the window, of the bottom window. And there are some photos of this which I'll show you. And the incident came a few hours after a number of Kempsey people, just a bit down the road, reported a strange bright light in the West Kempsey sky between 6:10 p.m. and 6:30. Now, the man who went through the window, whose name was not being published, so I don't know who he is either, to protect him from unwanted publicity, he was an Aboriginal man, and he vows that he will not live in the house again. And he is now in Sydney and wants his wife to go there with him. But she says she cannot because of the children, and she'd prefer to stay in the house. But there's nowhere else for her to live. And she said, I don't like it. I sleep with the blankets over my head. I guess I am scared too. And the woman said that her husband, he had been drinking earlier in the evening, and he was not drunk at all. So it wasn't like he was drunk, but he had been drinking earlier in the evening. And she said, we came home from the neighbours at about 10 o'clock after watching television. My husband went to bed and was playing with the baby. He got up and went to the kitchen to have a drink of water, but he didn't turn on the light. And afterwards said he tipped his head back towards the sink and saw the little face pressed up against the window. So it had no hair, and it looked like a small saucer. It looked like a small saucer, and it had features, but he could not describe them. So I just imagine this little face sort of pressed up against the glass. And he doesn't remember much about going through the window, but says that he was sucked out by some force, was sucking him out through the window. And he fell out at the bottom of the steps on his back. And his wife ran outside and thought he would be stunned, but he wasn't, and he wasn't even winded. He jumped up and he ran like hell down to the gravel, a pile down near the house, pile of dirt. And she said she ran after him and he was crying and shaking. And she thought that he had the horrors. And she told him so, that you've got the horrors. And she went back to the house and asked him not to leave. And he was so frightened. The woman said that she had gone to the hospital with her husband, where a stitch was inserted in a cut to the finger on his right hand. And she had to leave him there to go home to the children. And she believes that her husband may have become unruly because the police were called, and later they took him to the lockup, where he ended up spending the night. And his wife said that he had told her several times, "You think I'm mad? I'm not. I saw something. You think I'm mad? I'm not. I saw something." And she said, "I know that he's not superstitious and that he doesn't believe in ghosts or men from space, but he does now." And so an Argus reporter went to the home and came away puzzled by the bizarre incident. The man, who was about 5'3" tall and weighing about 8.5 stone, was standing at a sink about 18 inches wide. And his wife insists that he was in a horizontal position going through the window and that he was not struggling or thrashing at all, just going through like that, straight out the window. The pane of glass he went through is 4 feet 6 inches from the ground. His leap, which shattered the glass but did not break the frame, would be impossible from a standing position. And you'll see that when I show you the photo. He went through a glass plane 32 inches wide and 10 inches deep, touched nothing on the sink in front of him, and tumbled 7 feet 2 inches to the bottom of the back steps. He was not hurt in the fall, and he now had soreness, it said that he now had soreness that night or the next day. He did not put the light on in the kitchen, and no light was being reflected from the bedroom door. The street light outside is strip lighting. The moon that night was in the first quarter. There was also a light cover of cloud. So that's an extraordinary event, absolutely extraordinary. Now, Mr. Arnold Nelson of Taylor Street saw a reddish light over the Macleay River, and he was on the veranda farewelling his sister-in-law, Mrs. Cyril Adamson, and they watched the light descend slowly into the Macleay River between the West Kempsey Reservoir and the hospital. Mr. Nelson said the light was very low and appeared about 4 feet in diameter. He saw a smoke trail following the descent. So let's have a look at the photos. I'll just go back to there. So this is where Greenhill is. This is an incredible story. So Kempsey is obviously in the middle of that. So the Macleay River winds through the countryside there. And if you look towards the left of screen, to the left upper side there, you can see Greenhill. So it's just a little satellite place. And I went looking to find the house. And it's hard to pinpoint. I thought I found it, but there's incredibly old photos with very little information in the pictures. And it was actually the stumps of the house that gave me the best possibility. But I wasn't confident enough to bring the house forward as being that this is the house. So I didn't include it in the photos, but it could have been the house. So this is the window. So there's the photo of his wife pointing at the window. And as you'll notice, the window actually has a center piece of timber that runs through it, where her finger is actually sitting at that point, and the glass is broken there. So you could not leap through that window. It's not a window that you could just jump up feet first and put yourself through that window, and certainly without breaking that actual center piece of wood that runs through. So, and as you'll see there in that photo, one of the clues was the trees in the background. So I look for everything when I'm looking to try and find a location. And even with my skills, I still wasn't able to exactly pinpoint which house this occurred in. But that shows her pointing at the place in the window. Now, this next picture from the Argus shows the descent where he fell. So he's gone through that bottom pane there with that center piece of timber, and he's landed on the steps below with nothing other than a few scratches. So that's incredible. And I thought maybe those stumps might help me find the house. Long time, houses change plenty over 50 years. So it's I couldn't confidently say that I'd found the house. But it is only a small place. There wouldn't be any more than 30 houses there. So that is on its side. That is on the side of someone trying to track this place down. So that's an incredible story that a man who has got no interest in UFOs whatsoever goes to the kitchen sink and he sees a strange face at that window. Now, that face was either hovering at the window or it was an incredibly tall being standing on those steps looking in through the window. So 7-foot drop to the ground. So that's kind of probably your average Bigfoot height from the window to the ground. Certainly, I couldn't imagine myself going through that window and not hurting myself fairly extensively, being cut to pieces and then bruised and battered and not being able to get up when you landed on that step. But this gentleman sprung right up, a few cuts on his hands, and the greatest fright of his life. So it's interesting, isn't it? And the other thing I also want to note too, and this happens so often with UFO encounters in Australia, is that water is involved. You know, there's a river. The river is, you know, a central part to the story in some ways because it's like a big snake that snakes its way through the area, and UFOs have always been attracted to water. So, yeah, it's really, really a very fascinating tale. And the article continues on, and they said at about 6:10 p.m. on Friday, Mrs. Ina Murray of Gabriel Avenue, her son David, daughter, and nephew Rick Cook saw a bright light reddish in colour with purple overtones in the northwest sky. It was travelling low and its brightness fluctuated like a twinkling star. And Mrs. Murray said her son watched the light through the binoculars and he saw a smoke trail behind it. They then saw the light descend, and they described it as a controlled and deliberate descent. Somewhere near the hospital, it then disappeared. At first, they believed the light to be coming from a helicopter landing, but disregarded this because the light was too bright and way too big. So that also, and when you sort of go, well, that's a crazy story, the gentleman going through the window. And if it was just that story alone, you could go, well, you know, maybe it's a beat up, maybe it didn't actually happen. But in the context of this Kempsey Flap, and this is probably going to take 2 episodes to get through this particular story, it certainly adds a lot more weight to the possibility that this strange event, in fact, did occur. So, and as you can see, the newspaper is simply reporting the events, and they didn't give it some kind of spectacular spin. They didn't have a splashed headline that says "Man sucked out window." You know, it wasn't done in that National Enquirer kind of a way. They've just simply open-mindedly taken down the information and reported it to the people in the local area. So that's interesting. And the fun and games continue. So on Thursday, April 15th, 1971, the Argus had another article on strange happenings in the district. And the puzzle of a strange bright light seen over Kempsey on Friday evening, April 2nd, deepened yesterday when a woman reported that the light had a parachute attached to it. Mrs. Ailsa Glenda Somerville of 45 Short Street, Kempsey. Now, back in those days, they used to publish people's addresses. Can you imagine that now? But back in the 70s, it was quite frequent that they would publish someone's actual address, normally just the street, but as you'll see here, the Argus were not afraid to put down your house number as well into the local paper. So Mrs. Somerville of 45 Short Street, Kempsey, saw the light disappear outside her window and watched it for several seconds before it disappeared. The light had appeared somewhere around 6 p.m. and she described it, as many others have described it, as a brilliant pink light with lighter tonings on the outer part of the sphere. And she said, I first noticed it passing the window of my house, which is very close to the Macleay River and overlooks it. I followed it from window to window, and I was amazed at the brilliance of the colour. The light was no more than about 50 to 60 feet from the house and about 40 feet from the ground. So I call that 4 Bigfoots tall. The light was so intense that I could see the outline of a parachute. It seemed to be attached to this glowing ball by cords or some other material. These were very distinct. The light glided smoothly past the house and seemed to go towards the trees. I kept watching it until it went out of sight. No, I wasn't frightened, just fascinated by the brilliant colour. Mrs. Somerville said she mentioned the incident to her husband, Mr. Darrell Somerville, secretary of the Macleay River Cooperative Dairy Company Limited, and he had made a search of the riverbank and undergrowth near the spot the light disappeared, but could not find anything. And yesterday, a taxi driver who prefers not to be named said that about the same time on the same night, he noticed a glowing ball to the southwest of Kempsey while driving along the Fredericton Strait. And you'll see all these little places as I put the maps up. He said there were 3 passengers in the car and we had it under observation for about 5 minutes. It seemed to be a rusty orange colour, like a sunset. We thought it was an aircraft, but the light went over the aerodrome and travelled towards Green Hill. So Green Hill is where the man was sucked out the window. It disappeared at Green Hill, and we knew it was Green Hill because we could see the lights there. Dozens of people have reported seeing the light since a report appeared in the Argus last Thursday. The first to make a report was Mrs. Ina Murray of Gabriel Avenue. And she said the light appeared to be travelling under control, made a deliberate descent, and she spoke of a smoky trail was also seen coming from the light. And a Mr. Arnold of Taylor Street, South Kempsey, saw that. Mrs. Somerville described the smoke as wispy. And a few hours later, this is how the article continues, on the same day, an Aboriginal man claimed that he was sucked out that window. So that's very contextual, isn't it? When you've got, these type of things happening. So let's have a look here. So that shows you, again, the Kempsey, out in the direction of the Kempsey Airport, where the little red dropper is out here. And this is Taylor Street, this one. This is where the woman who features in the article at the start, her house is down in this area here, down where that tree band is there, and the Macleay River goes past, and her husband searched along through those trees there at the bottom of that picture. So that's very interesting. And the other street location here being Taylor Street down here. So people can obviously, must be relatively decent views around the river here for people to see when they're looking. So very interesting. So very busy times. Now, moving forward again, Saturday, April 17th, 1971, the Argus has another article about UFOs, strange things in the district. And the title of it is that eyewitnesses talk of ball of fire. And the puzzle of the bright light took another twist yesterday when a Southwest Rocks resident reported sighting a ball of fire on the night of March 25th. So people are coming forward with other sightings, and they just keep on coming, and there's other strange stuff that we're going to really enjoy hearing about. And back in those days, they always pronounced women as the husband's name. They'd never just say that it was Valerie Smith. They'd say it was Mrs. Peter Smith. So that's how they wrote back in the early 70s. So this woman's described as Mrs. A. Laws, and so her husband's probably Arthur or Andrew, and her name doesn't actually come up, which it's always hard to track people down. And again, this is over 50 years ago. So, I haven't gone to the trouble of trying to track down witnesses because I thought a lot of these people are probably dead in nursing homes, or not possible to find. And there's just enough material here just to go through. So Mrs. A. Laws, who lived in Arthur Street, said that she had been reluctant to say anything earlier. Now, Southwest Rocks is more towards the coast. It's a little bit outside of Kempsey, but it's in the same area. So she'd been reluctant to say anything earlier because people would have thought that she was mad, or so she thought. And she said that she had been awakened at about 10 p.m. on Thursday, March 25, to find her room illuminated by a bright burnt orange coloured light. She said, "My bedroom overlooks the bowling club and the Arakoon National Park and the old jail." She got out of bed, pulled back the blinds, and saw a huge bright light that was 8 or 10 feet in diameter near the bowling club. She said that she thought the club was on fire. That's how red it was. And then she saw that this was a great ball of light, and she described it as a beautiful sunset. "I thought it might have been a flare from a ship in distress, or that I was having a nightmare. And then I saw the light come down slowly to earth and disappear behind the bowling club. I didn't see it again." And Mrs. Law said her youngest son, Doug, had come home from work between 10 and 10:30 p.m. and had awakened his brother, fearing someone was in trouble at sea. And he had gone to the pilot and reported the incident. And he'd been assured that no one would be using a flare such as the one he saw. And Mrs. Law said, "I watched this beautiful light for 5, maybe 10 minutes, and I've never seen anything like it before." And there was another report of a strange light seen over Kempsey on Friday, the 2nd of April. Mrs. Dulcie Rossiter, who lived near Green Hill, where the man was sucked out the window, said that between 6 p.m. and 6:10 p.m, she saw a huge bright light moving towards Kempsey from the direction of the it's hard to pronounce, Dulcony Mountain near Crescent Head. And you can tell I'm not a local to the area. She said, "When I first saw it, I thought it was an aeroplane, but the light was too bright. It was deep orange in colour, and then it turned to red as it drew closer." Mrs. Rossiter said that the light was under view for 5 to 10 minutes. She'd put binoculars onto it and saw it was trailing smoke. And she said the light appeared to go between some trees on the riverbank between the town reservoir and the hospital. As it disappeared from view, I could see the trail of smoke. So I've just got to show you another picture that I forgot to show you earlier. And this is a witness illustration. Where are we? Here we go. So this is what was reported down near the river. So that was that bright light like that. And this was in the Argus newspaper. And the reason these pictures look cloudy is because they've actually been glued onto paper with the old-fashioned clag. So that's why all these pictures look a little bit cloudy looking, and obviously the age of them as well. So that's the impression that the witness had, that was what it actually. So they can only talk about it in relation to the times of when they actually saw it. So, that's the way it is. And so this is where the lady was. So she was in Arthur Street here. And that's where that purple line is. And you can see these are only small areas. There's a lovely golf course off to the right-hand side, and it's surrounded by National Park out there and along the coast. And this is sort of the high version, of Southwest Rocks. So the house is here, the bowls club, and this is in the viewing of the direction where that white line runs through the image there. It shows where the light was seen out over the bowls club and the Coon National Park area. So, and this one shows you how far away it is from Kempsey. So down the bottom right, it says Crescent Head Lookout and Crescent Head just off to the left there. And then I put a little measuring mark there to show you that distance, about, I think it's 12 kilometres or so, maybe 13, 14K from Kempsey across to the Crescent Head area. So that gives you a bit of an idea that all of these sightings are occurring in a very localized area. And so the top right picture there shows Southwest Rocks and Arakoon National Park. So right on the top of that bend in the top right-hand side of the picture. So that gives you a pretty good idea of that location. There we go. And it just continues. So on Tuesday, April 20th, 1971, the Argus again reports, and the headline is, "Circles burnt in grass paddocks." Now, a Christmas Creek resident told the Argus on Saturday afternoon that he had found in his fields 2 circular patches of grass that had been scorched as if by an iron. Now, the gentleman's name was Mr. Brian Yarnold of Christmas Creek. Said that he had not made know of his finding because people would not have believed it anyway. That's me quoting him. And he was prompted by reports of sightings of UFOs over Kempsey in recent weeks. And the Yarnold family recalled to a reporter several sightings of strange lights, the most recent being the Easter Saturday night. Mr. Yarnold said that he had found a month ago a scorched area of grass in his long corner paddock that was some 20 feet in diameter. And he said, "I noticed it because it was round. I took another look at it because there appeared to be no reason for it to be there. No reason for that mark to be there. It appeared as if something had been standing there. Since then, the patch of hibbered grass had recovered and is now growing well." At the prompting of his wife, Mr. Yarnold also recalled that a burnt patch about 10 feet in diameter had been found last year in a paddock about 200 yards from the homestead. Mrs. Yarnold said the patch appeared overnight, and she said there was nothing there the day before, but the next morning there was this patch, about 3/4 of it looking as if it had been scorched by something hot. The Yarnolds went to the property last May since their 14-year-old daughter Sue had drawn the family's attention to a number of strange lights at night. And Sue was a second-form student of Kempsey High School and an amateur astronomer. And she was adamant that the lights are not meteors, flares, weather balloons, satellites, fireworks, swamp gas, or any of your other mundane explanations. And Sue said on Easter Saturday night at about 10 p.m, "I saw a reddish purple light in the north, travelling from the south. It was bigger than a full moon, but hazy, even though the night was clear." And she said, "I had it in view for about 10 minutes and watched it gradually descend on the northwest until it disappeared behind trees." And Sue said that she had seen a number of unexplained lights in the sky in the past 11 months. And about last July, there was also a series of lights over Bellbrook, which is in that area. The lights were reddish and had a green tinge. They seemed to be travelling west at a fairly fast rate. She saw them on several successive nights. And once there were 2 travelling together. She said the strange thing is that there's never any noise. You can hear aircraft for miles at night, but there's never any sound with these lights. And her mother related how she and the whole family had seen a strange light come from over Kempsey from the north and disappeared to the southwest while they were living in Douglas Fenterman Street a year ago. And the mother said the light was red, then blue, and had a halo of white and kept changing colour all the time. We saw it at about 8 p.m. over the river near Short Street. It was rocking from side to side, and then quite suddenly it disappeared. And around the same time, Mr. Yarnold sighted on the Glenrock Flat a blue light that sped from Fredericton towards Crescent Head at an incredible rate. He said it was a brilliant blue light and it was gone in a flash. And since the Argus published a story about a reddish purple light seen on the evening of April 2nd, a number of people have confirmed the sighting. So that's interesting. So we'll just have a little look at that area. So Bellbrook is right up there in the top corner where that red line runs. Bellbrook is up there. And the Columbati, if you look down a little bit further to where that green writing is, Columbati is another area that focuses in these stories also coming up. So, Bellbrook, Taruka, and down to the extreme left you see Willie. There's a place called Willy Willy. So there's this triangular area out there from Bellbrook, Taruka, Willy Willy, across to Columbati. There's an absolute UFO highway during this period of time. And Columbati there's literally nothing there. And this is the problem even with newspaper articles, is that it's very hard to track information down sometimes. And even if the articles at first appear to give you good information, you just struggle sometimes to translate that information into usable from an investigator's point of view. So without local knowledge, sometimes it's very, very hard. When they talk about such and such flat or such and such straight, that's local knowledge. And I can sit here and type it into Google Maps, bang, 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 and that information doesn't come up. So that's where you need to go out to the locations on the ground, talk to the locals, and find out where some of these locations actually are. So, it's always challenging, but I always do my best from the armchair with Google Maps to try and find as much information as I can with any of these stories or any of these encounters. So just excuse me while I have a little drink. This is one hell of a busy newspaper, because on Saturday, April 24th, 1971, so from the start of April, now we're up to the 24th of April, 1971, the Argus reports, the local Kempsey Argus reports, this is the headline: 3 boys see unidentified object overhead. 3 schoolboys aged 13, 11 and 9 yesterday morning sighted a silvery object trailing flames descending over Columbati rail from a great height and disappear behind a hill to the southwest. Now, I'll just pause there for a minute, because that's what confused me, because there's Columbati and then they're saying Columbati rail. And I thought, that's got to be a train station. It's got to be a train station. Columbati rail, there's got to be a train station. Okay. But when you go there and look, there's really nothing there. And I did a little bit of research, and there was a railway line there was a railway in that area or a station there until 1974. But Columbati rail is actually another place. So I've discovered that as well. So you just never can be quite sure on face value of what information means. So I took it as being the railway station, but it's actually a place called Columbati rail. So that was interesting. And they're all the fun things that you discover as you investigate. So these 3 schoolboys saw this silvery object trailing flames descending over Columbati rail from a great height and disappear behind a hill to the southwest. The boys were all shaken by their experience, and they told their school teacher, Mr. Brian Moss, and later an Argus reporter, that the object began to drop 4 legs as it swung low over their heads and banked away as if to land. Peter Fuller, 13, his brother Christopher, 9, and Ronald Donnelly, 11, saw the object about 8:30 a.m. as they waited for the Columbati Rail post office to open. That was all a bit confusing for me as well. And their story came within minutes of a report from a Mrs. Faye Booney of Temagog that she had seen on Thursday between 10:30 and 11 p.m. a dazzling ball of light suspended from some object she had watched it land and later move away. It also follows reports from 2 fishermen of odd lights and silvery objects seen in the last fortnight off Crescent Head waters. And the schoolboys cannot be shaken from their story that they saw a bright silvery object descend at incredible speed yesterday from the eastern skyline. Christopher Fuller said that he had been sitting on the side of a culvert near the post office when high in the sky he saw an object which seemed to be enveloped, perhaps, in flames. He said, I was looking up in the sky and saw this little dot get bigger and bigger. It seemed to be a ball of fire. And he said he ran to his brother and Ronald, standing about 10 to 15 feet away, and pointed the object out to them. And by this time, the object had dropped through the atmosphere at such a rate that it was now almost overhead. All boys said there was no sound whatsoever as the object came into view and passed overhead. The elder boy, Peter, said, I saw it coming down fast as a jet from the east. It came down steeply at first and then started to lose speed. We saw legs starting to come out, and there were 4 legs and they had pads on the bottom. This is little, 11-year-old boy's description. The fire at the back got less. The thing I saw was silvery and shaped a bit like an egg. There were big square windows all around the sides, and the sides went out through the bottom. Peter said he could not see the top of the object. He said it came down and seemed to be about 200 to 300 feet above them. And we could see the windows very clearly. Then this thing started to wobble, and it banked like an aircraft, and the legs were coming down. It disappeared over the other side of the railway and went down into the gully. Peter said that they had been very frightened by the experience. He said, I sat down next to the culvert to watch the thing go over. I was so scared, it nearly fell into the water. Oh, sorry, he nearly fell into there must have been something water nearby. And all the boys said the object they saw bore no resemblance to comic book flying saucers. Peter said, this one was different. We were scared. I don't even want to see another one again. And their teacher, Mr. Moss, separated the boys, and as soon as they told him their experience, and he asked them to draw what they had seen, and all the illustrations show an elliptical object with windows around the bottom. The 3 drawings show exhaust flames, but one drawn by Christopher, the first boy to sight the object, is surrounded by flames. Interesting how people draw different things. And unsuccessful searches were made of the Columbati area in an effort to find evidence that the object had landed. Mr. Moss said that the directions given by the children, the object could have come down near Mr. Peter Yarnold's property. That's a name we've heard before, at Christmas Creek, Columbati. And last week, Mr. Yarnold and his family reported the burnt circular patches of grass on their property. So, and on the Thursday night, Mrs. Faye Bonner of Temagog sighted an unusual object in the sky, 10:30 and 11. She told the Argus yesterday that she had been awoken by her dogs, which had begun barking as if disturbed. And she said they were barking furiously. I got up and quietened them down, and then I looked up and saw this brilliant orange light traveling in a northwesterly direction. It was huge, and it seemed attached to something that looked like a parachute or an object that shaped it was hanging from something. It was seen coming down slowly, and I watched it for at least 5 minutes. I woke my husband up, but he rolled over and went back to sleep again. That's it. It's so classic, isn't it? I watched the light again, and it appeared to be coming into land on Mrs. Leslie Allen's property. It came down slowly and lit up everything around it. Then it went behind some trees. I could see half the light above the trees and an illumination through the trees. Everything was black and there was complete blackness. Mrs. Bonner said she went back to her bed, but throughout the rest of the night kept getting up to see if the light reappeared. Yesterday morning, she could only guess at the area where it had come down. And she said, I had no landmark. I thought it had come down about 2 or 3 or 4 miles away, but it could have been 15 miles away when you consider the distortions that occur at night. And there was no sound. It was totally quiet. So let's have a look at the boys. So this was in the newspaper at the time. So there are the boys. That was them back at that time, the 3 boys who reported that incident. And I'm sure they, as they said themselves, they were terrified by this thing that seemed to come screaming out of the sky, dropped landing legs, and banked off to an undisclosed location. And this is a picture. This is actually a composite picture, I think, drawn by the Argus, who took the boys' pictures and drew it this is what they'd seen. So this silvery object, and as you can see, it's got lights around the window and these classic landing legs coming down with the big foot pads, and they must have been relatively big foot pads. So there's a lot going on here, isn't there? in this little area, Kempsey. Unbelievable. Saturday, April the 24th, 1971. The Argus reports, fishermen see object near Crescent Head. Two fishermen told about seeing strange lights off Crescent Head Beach and hearing noises offshore that sounded like gravel being crushed, only 10 times louder. Mr. Ian Farrowell of Yarraville Street, Kempsey, and Mr. Jack Casey admitted freely that what they had seen and heard had frightened them so much they left the beach hurriedly and went home. For Mr. Casey, the experience was the second experience and almost identical he was to have in a week. On Easter Saturday night at 9:45, fishing in the exact same spot, he saw lights and heard a noise out to sea that could not be explained. Last Saturday night, fishing with Mr. Farrowell, there had been strange lights seaward and a sound and a loud grounding noise at exactly the same time, or grinding noise. Mr. Farrowell said that they had left their car at Maguire's Crossing and had walked 2 miles south to begin their fishing when they saw a light in the sky. Well, I mean, walking 2 miles down a beach, that's hard, that's walking on a beach, you can double the distance from an exercise, but that's like 4 miles in terms of walking. But they actually parked their car and walked 2 miles down the beach with their fishing rods when they saw the light. And Mr. Farrowell said, we were just baiting our hooks when I looked up and saw a large dull red light in the sky. It seemed to change colour to an orange shade and was twice the size of the moon directly above. The light was out in the shipping lane and low above the water. It moved slightly to the left and then slightly to the right. Mr. Casey said that when he looked up, the light had turned to a blue-white colour and become smaller and smaller until it disappeared. And he said, we watched it for about 3 or 4 minutes. The strange thing is that while the light was in the view, there was no reflection on the water at all. Both men said that when the light went out, they heard a terrible noise. It seemed like a motor noise, like a gravel crusher at work, only 10 times louder than the sound of gravel crushing. And if you've ever heard gravel crushing, that is a loud noise. Think of that 10 times louder. As the men walked back over the sandhills to their car, they saw what seemed to be a cloud out to sea. And Mr. Farrowell said, I was sure it was a cloud, but then I saw a dull silver disc-shaped object over the sea where the light had been. We could still hear the noise, even though the sea was rough. The noise could be heard when we got back to the car and drove away. Now, Mr. Casey said that on Easter Saturday night, he had been fishing in the same place when he saw 3 lights moving along the shipping lane. I was alone, and it was about 9:45 p.m. I saw 3 red lights, which seemed to have blue through them, coming along the coast from Point Plommer. It seems at the time the lights could have been flames from an exhaust. They moved quickly across the sky towards Hat Head and appeared to be joined together. It only took about 5 minutes for the lights to pass across the sky from Plommer to Hat Head. So that's a point of land, is when you call it a headland, I suppose. Then the first light went out and the second and third stayed in view. There was a terrific noise and all the lights came on. They started to move towards Maguire's Crossing and seemed to pass between me down the beach and the car. I went back to the car and I left. There were 2 other people on the beach at the time and they saw the lights and arrived back at their car at the same time I did. The noise at sea could still be heard as he drove off. Mr. Casey said he would be going back to the crossing tonight with some friends and night glasses to try and unravel the mystery. So that's very, very interesting. Now, here we go. We've got a picture here. So that's the Crescent Head area. And if you look up from the Crescent Head lookout and that beach, and Australia's got beautiful beaches. And as that beach stretches up to the north, you see Killick Beach and where it says Belmore River. that's the area of the sighting. And so this here is the road, McGuire's Crossing. So that's where they actually were, on this beach area here. So where that purple line is, and they walked down 2 miles south along that stretch of beach. So this is where the fishermen were standing. That's where they saw the object and heard the strange and very loud, by the sounds of it, crushing sound. So obviously everybody was very perturbed by, all these strange occurrences that were happening. So on Tuesday, April 24th, 1971, the Argus again reports that teacher sights grey object in the sky. A Kempsey school teacher on Saturday reported sighting an object in the sky about the same time on Friday that a similar sighting was made at Columbati Rail by the boys. Mrs. Jill French, of 38, in the street. There you go. They're reporting the exact witness address. She said she was driving down C Street at about 8:30 a.m. when she saw an object cross the sky from an easterly direction and travelling southwest. At the time she was driving along the crest of the hill outside Kempsey Showground, she said, "I saw this gorgeous light going across the sky. At first I thought it was a kite with a long tail, but then I realised that that was not so. The light was brilliant and it trailed behind a very long cigar-shaped object. The light was fiery, an orange-red ball of fire, and it also showed white, and it was stunning. Mrs. French said the object did not appear to be travelling very fast when it came into her sight. It appeared to be close to the ground and seemed to bank as it passed to the southeast behind the PMG towers in Elbow Street. So, of course, being a great Google fan, Google Maps fan, I had to go and find the house, didn't I? So that was where she was living at the time. That's the property. And I also tracked down the location where she was driving. So C Street runs from the top left right through almost the centre of that picture. And off to the left of C Street, there is the Kempsey Showground. Now, from my understanding, Kempsey, that area is a fairly hilly sort of an area. And this was where she would have seen it, because she described it as seeing it at the top of the hill where the showgrounds were. And as you can see, C Street there obviously banks down and goes down a hill. The road extends down a hill and the showground is off to the left. So that's the area where she had actually seen it. So, and it just continues. Thursday, April 29th, 1971. More lights seen. The mystery of strange lights in Macleay skies continues to grow with each new sighting. 5 more reports have been received, 2 confirming the sightings of a silvery grey object in the sky at 8:30 on Friday, and 3 reported fresh sightings. 4 teenagers said this week they had seen a large red glowing light near Warwick Park Racecourse on April 20th. The light had appeared to be about tree level and was moving very fast in a northerly direction towards Columbati, Fredericton, and the teenagers declined to be named. They said the light appeared to be about a foot in diameter, and they followed it by car along North Street and down Second Street to the Pacific Highway. One of them said the light was all this time travelling in a direct line towards Columbati. When it was directly over Columbati, it was joined by 3 smaller lights, which came from nowhere. The smaller lights then started travelling north at the same speed as the larger light. The teenagers said they watched for about 5 or 10 minutes before the lights disappeared. All of them thought at first the lights might have been warning lights on the Smithtown radio tower. However, the light was always on their right. As they chased it, at all times it was low in the sky. And a Mr. Clary Briggs of Smithtown said he had seen a pulsating light in the eastern sky at about 7:15 p.m. on Saturday. The light tended to glow and changed colour constantly. And he said, I watched it with my family for about 20 minutes. Then it began to move up and down and occasionally sideways. It began to fade and disappeared. Eventually it reappeared and every 15 seconds changed colour from red to green, then blue, and so on. On Sunday night, Mr. Briggs said he had seen a similar light about the same time over the Columbati, Fredericton area, moving up and down and sideways. It was not a star. A young woman said she and 3 others watching from West Street, had seen a light north of Kempsey on Tuesday night, and which was reddish colour and appeared surrounded by smoke. The light had moved sideways and up and down, and then moved in a southwest direction. And they'd been that scared that they had gone straight home. Mr. Max Marvin of South Kempsey and Miss Jean Piggott of West Kempsey both confirmed a sighting of a silvery grey object trailing fire or a bright light reported above the Macleay area 8:30 last Friday. Mr. Marvin said that he had seen the object flash across the sky from east to southwest, and he described the light as brilliant, like an oxy torch. The head appeared to be red hot, and Miss Piggott said that she had been travelling to work at Nestle's, which Nestle's is a chocolate factory, in Smithtown, and had seen a brilliant white and pink light cross the sky while driving down the Smithtown Road. So that's what they had described. So just quickly, just to give you a bit of an idea. So that's the Smithtown location is that red area at the top right-hand side. And if you look down the bottom corner, Kempsey is down to the bottom left of that page. Sorry, of that map. And then here we've also got show this one. So that's what Smithtown actually looks like. And the Smithtown Road snakes along the Macleay River, just off to the, rising to the left-hand top page there. So we have run out of time for this episode. And I said there was so much to unpack with the Kempsey encounters of 1971, 1972. It really is a dream flap with so much going on. And we've seen already in this episode a lot of activity. So next week, we shall pick up the stories again and we shall continue. So until then, I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Have a fantastic evening, and I will see you again next episode. Bye for now.